Welcome back to H-Lock Gaming. This week in Godforge episode 17. In this week's episode, we cover the trailer creation breakdown as well as the podcast with Bran the Broke. And as Ragewood would say, let's get into it. Okay, in this week's Tuesday video, Simon breaks down his trailer. We've seen some of this before and he goes over some more stuff in depth. The things I wanted to look at is actually something I mentioned in an earlier video where I said I thought there was more pillars. It's kind of hard to see here. This is obviously when they're making the trailer. And you can see that there are more pillars. If you can see my mouse, it's kind of dark. I don't know if these are pillars on the way in, but there's possibly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even another one over there, 7 pillars. So there may be more symbols we're not seeing. I couldn't see any in this whole thing. I watched it all the way through, so I don't think I missed any. But there are more pillars, so there may be more symbols we're not seeing, which may reveal more of kind of who the bad guy is for this game. And related to that, I want to show some stuff that Simon showed on the original storyboard that have to do with Gilgamesh. So originally Gilgamesh was going to come in and grab this, what Simon calls the Aether Well, and just throw it to the ground. But he felt like that wasn't impactful enough. So we see in this version, the storyboard, the original, storyboard that was actually created, that he walks in, looks at it, and he starts to grab something from his pocket. Now, just like in the trailer, it cuts back to the fight scene with Broomhild and Ra, but then I want to show what happens next in the storyboard. So Gilgamesh crushes this crystal or something, whatever it is, in his pocket and sort of sprinkles it into the Aether Well, as you can see here. And then the Aether Well starts getting corrupted. And if you remember kind of what this floor looks like here, Simon says, you can kind of see it there where my mouse is at the bottom of that picture. Corruption was going to start flowing out from the Aether Well. So to me, that says Gilgamesh is up to something nefarious. And at first I was kind of thinking when we saw Gilgamesh smash what we now know is the Aether Well, does that make him the bad guy? But I don't think he would actually be the main bad guy. He would just be working for somebody because, as far as we know right now, he's an epic. I don't think the main bad guy for the game would end up being an epic character. That just doesn't make sense. If you can end up playing who the main bad guy is, he's definitely going to be at least a legendary. So I would say he's probably working for somebody right now. Those are the main things I wanted to cover on this. There's a lot more in here. He talks about the studio they worked with, Narwhal, and how some of those guys are actually leaving and making their own studio. So maybe they'll work with Fateless again in the future. He had great things to say about all of them. Okay, this is kind of a first draft or rendering of the trailer I just wanted to show so people could see it and see the difference.
Or relatively early.
Notice to the storyboard up in the right-hand corner.
The grab.
You can try to break me. I cut my teeth on people like you. It's gonna take longer to take me down. I'm a step ahead.
The early models.
Wear my crown. Don't need a night to cut the cake. You can count the dragons that I slayed. You can give it all you got. 'Cause love is running through my veins. Oh, this line can't be tamed. There's fire in my blood.
So yeah, we kept some of the original shots in.
Burn.
Look at the arms coming out. See that part there where the arms fly the two dudes out? This is what we originally had. The dudes fly off and he nicks their weapons.
So one thing I thought was interesting is you can see in sort of the original trailer too, he walks up to it, whereas in the one we have now, it's just a flat walk. So that sort of grabbing the chalice and throwing it away makes sense, or the corruption coming out of it. And again, as you can see in here, it looks like there was more pillars. We see at least 2 here. I think that might be one. this might be a big wall just with symbols. So there might be more symbols we see later in, the full trailer as opposed to the announced trailer that'll give us more of an idea of who the main bad guy is, if not just a straight up full reveal. But yeah, I thought that was interesting, the walk up. I actually almost forgot about this part, the Aether Well. So when I looked it up, it said sort of in ancient mythology, this was known as the fifth element, the others being air, water, fire, and earth. If you want to kind of think of it in terms of modern terms, it's almost similar to dark matter. It was supposed to occupy the area outside of Earth. So what does that mean for Godforge? Well, if it sort of occupies all of space and time and everything around the world, if this is the well and Gilgamesh was going to corrupt it, it would sort of allow him to exert power over all regions of the gods, or maybe not him, whoever he's working for. So I think that's what's going on here. He was going to corrupt it, and then it would sort of weaken all the different regions where the gods lived. So he could then take them over, overthrow them, kill them. I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Okay, now to Wednesday's little art leak. Okay, this is not Wednesday's leak, but I wanted to start here to just remind you of this rare Sargon and Nebuchadnezzar right there that we see. They kind of look similar because we're going to see a similar look, and I think they might have reused the model and some of the hair and stuff. So let's take a look at that. All right, here we see Marduk. I think that's how you say it. He's an ancient Babylonian god. He's the god of creation, water, agriculture, justice, medicine, magic, and the patron god of Babylonia. So he's a head god, so maybe think, power level similar to Zeus or Odin, somebody like that. So I'm going to assume he's going to be a pretty powerful character, legendary probably, and his aura might somehow buff his squad or protect them in some way. And again, if you look at the face and the crown, that sort of looks like Nebuchadnezzar that we saw in last month's art attack leak. If you look at these wings here, obviously this is just the art concept, but they kind of remind me of Freya's wings with just some extra stuff here on the bottom. Yeah, as you can see here on ragewoodgaming.com, Freya's wings in-game. I think that's going to end up being the same asset, but we'll have to wait and see. They'll just probably add more to it to make it look different. I think this might be the first time we've seen this sandal concept on a character as well, so I'll have to wait and see what that looks like when rendered, but that's pretty cool. But I wanted to go to the weapon because it looks pretty awesome. Yeah, you can see here, it's a staff with sort of, they're showing this crystal sword. It looks like, kind of if the hilt was bigger and part of the weapon added on each end. And that looks like a pretty badass weapon. So again, this guy just seems like he's going to be pretty powerful, right? Yeah, I'm digging it. Yeah, you can see his hair, again, giving you sort of that Nebuchadnezzar or even Gilgamesh vibe. So yeah, pretty cool. Look forward to seeing more of that character when he's actually rendered in engine or in game. All right, now to Thursday's podcast. All right, on this week's Fateless podcast, we have Bran the Broke. So I've heard him talk about it in his videos before or relate them to board games, but apparently he actually has published one. He said the traditional route, which I believe is with another company, working as part of the team, and then a few he's designed on his own and has tried to publish / has published them. So that's interesting there. And him, Sham, and Dirk all kind of talked about how it's actually impossible to manufacture board games in the United States, I guess. It's just too expensive and poor quality. So that's interesting. Didn't know that. And then when they're talking about board games, Brad brings up the point of the Valheim board game and asks, are board games almost more of a collectible now? The best way to sell them is to kind of already have this audience built in because you have a pre-existing world, in this case, Valheim, to sell them. And they all kind of agreed, yeah, that's the best way to do it. They said it's very hard to actually make a board game and then advertise it and make money. You're better off, kind of getting content creators like they are here to talk about your game by sending it to them to advertise it. And then once they start talking about Godforge, Bran asks, what's the hardest thing to balance in the game? And Dirk says they want to make counterplay stronger. And then he talks about ultimates because he uses the example of how speed is so important in Raid. And they kind of, by having this ultimate system, they took it out of that and they have two separate speed systems in a way, he said. And I think that's kind of what he means by counterplay, like make it stronger. He did use the example that they don't want ultimates going all the time. But I think based on his counterplay comment, he wants it, or rather they want it to be balanced in a way you could be setting something up to use your ultimates, to sort of one-shot things, as opposed to, they use the example that so many games, when they're quote-unquote balanced, nothing feels impactful. So they want to avoid that. And one thing Brand said that I never actually thought about consciously, but it is true, is game balance means the game is fun and not necessarily actually balanced, because when it's that way, nothing feels strong. Then for a while they talked about esports and, kind of how Raid missed the boat. And it sounds like they're very aware of that. So it'll probably be a focus. And we've already talked about before how they want to do some custom lobby stuff. So we'll see what else they add in the future. At the end, they ask Bran, what would you want in the game? Favorite character you'd like to see in there. And he does a two-parter. He says, one, he wants to see skins from something called Epic the Musical. I'm not familiar with that, but that could be cool, skins. And then two, he said stuff based on H.P. Lovecraft. The reason this one is a bit shorter is they did talk a lot about board games, and I really know nothing about them. I don't really play them. So I didn't really feel like I'd want to try and summarize stuff I'm pretty much out of my depth on. So if you're looking for more from me, I'll try to link to my video from last week where I break down what Simon says about the beta tower and what I think it could be based on, or rather what it could be fun if it's based on as well. This has been H-Lock. Thanks for watching. Bye.